thank you all for tuning in to another edition of Outside the Shop with me, your host, Daryl D. Lane. As always, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, whether it be via Facebook Live or Twitter/Periscope. I will be uploading this video onto YouTube after I am done. Also, if you guys want to check out my regular sports podcast, Barbershop Sports Talk, you can check it out on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, the whole deal. And if you want to hear me when I have to talk about my regular daily sports show. Also, the podcast will be released Friday. I will release it tonight. I'm going to have Ben Karen on host the Sports Caller podcast. We are going to do predictions for the NFC Championship game and the AFC Championship game. We're going to find out why Ben is a Buffalo hater as well, and he doesn't give us a chance to beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead and claim our birthright as champions of the football world. Also, we're going to dive into some college football as well, as we always do when Ben Karen comes on. So definitely check that out. And again, that will be released tonight. It will be released tonight. I'll post it on Facebook and I'll post it on Twitter and all this different stuff Friday morning. So let's get down what we have on the agenda today. NFL coaching hires. A lot of stuff to talk about there. Steelers, Packers news. And also Brooklyn Nets. Used to call it the New Jersey Nets. Brooklyn Nets. And the Pac 12 commissioner will no longer be the Pac 12 commissioner. Rip Larry Scott. So let's start with this. Nick Sirianni is reportedly going to be the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, and he will replace Doug Peterson. So here's where I want to go when I talk about this. Everybody, when you get rid of somebody like Doug Peterson, right, what do you typically want? You would think there'd be a completely different, right? A complete difference. So maybe instead of he was an offensive mind, you go get a defensive mind / special teams coordinator, right? Instead, not only do you still get an offensive mind, which they said they wanted an offensive mind because, right, Carson Wentz is there, Jalen Hurts is there. We know everybody wants these offensive minds. But they get an offensive mind who is from the Doug Peterson tree. And you might be like, what are you talking about, Daryl? He's from Indianapolis, offensive coordinator of the Indianapolis Colts. Well, who's the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts? Frank Reich, former Buffalo Bill, by the way. And who was Frank Reich the offensive coordinator for? The Philadelphia Eagles under Doug Peterson. They won a Super Bowl together. So you're kind of hiring from the Doug Peterson tree. Don't you want to get away from Doug Peterson? Why are you hiring his protege's protege, right? Right? It doesn't make any sense. So that would give me a cause to pause. And I'm like, listen, go a different direction, right? If you want this offensive mind, and we're going to get into this in a bit, but there's tons of offensive minds. There's an Eric Bieniemy who's completely off the Doug Peterson tree. There's a Josh McDaniels. There's a Joe Brady who was really good with LSU last year. There's a lot of different people to pick from. So I think this is a curious hire by the Indianapolis Colts. Also, by the way, this guy didn't call plays for the Indianapolis Colts. I don't know if anybody peeped that, but he didn't call plays. Now, next up, when we look at all these NFL head coaching hires, and I have the list right in front of me. So we have Urban Meyer. He got hired by the Jags. We have Robert Saleh. He got hired by the Jets. We have Arthur Smith, got hired by the Falcons. We have Brandon Staley, got hired by the Chargers. We got Dan Campbell, hired by the Lions. And we have Nick Sirianni, like I said, hired by the Philadelphia Eagles. Only one spot left. The Houston Texans. Reportedly, Adam Schefter said this over the weekend. The Houston Texans are the most undesirable job, and it makes sense. The most undesirable job is the only job that is still not does not have a seat occupied, and we can definitely see that what's going on with the Houston Texans. Now, there's only one spot left, and there's a couple of guys that I wrote down that have been linked to head coaching jobs at different points and have some head coaching experience. First of all, there's Doug Peterson. Is Doug Peterson just not going to be a coach this year because he's a former Super Bowl winning coach, a recently former Super Bowl winning coach? So that'd be a little weird for him to be out of the job. Also, Joe Brady, a guy that's been linked heavily to potentially being a head coach. Brian Daboll. Obviously, Brian Daboll, like I said last show, he's staying with the Bills, but he's another guy out there. And Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels spurring the Colts. Coincidentally, as we're talking about the Colts, Nick Sirianni being the offensive coordinator for the Colts. Josh McDaniels spurring the Colts. And given that, there's also Eric Bieniemy. And with Eric Bieniemy, offensive coordinator of the Chiefs. So we have about 4 or 5 names that somebody's not going to get the job, right, for the Houston Texans. Eric Bieniemy kind of just came out and said he wants to be a head coach in the NFL. You also have guys like Alex Smith saying Eric Bieniemy should be a head coach in the NFL. There's a lot of steam. There's a lot of movement towards this Eric Bieniemy thing going on. So for me, as I'm looking at this, I'm kind of like, Eric Bieniemy might have to take this job, right? Like, Eric Bieniemy might have to take this job. He's been a guy linked, like I said, he's been linked to the Houston Texans. Potentially, he's a guy that Deshaun Watson would like. Maybe that could help Deshaun Watson stay. But as we're looking at this, somebody's going to be left holding the bag in the NFL coaching carousel. Somebody's going to be left without a date to the dance. Somebody is going to be left out. So it's going to be interesting who that is. And maybe it's none of these names. Maybe in 2 weeks from now, we're looking, the Houston Texans have a new head coach, and it's not Eric Bieniemy, Josh McDaniels, Doug Peterson, Brian Daboll, or Joe Brady. Maybe it's none of them. But I'll tell you this. One of these guys is going to be left holding the bag, and they're going to be an OC, DC position, or they're going to be a head coach someplace else, maybe college, something. But there's going to be something different, or they don't get any of these guys. So I think that's going to be interesting to look at. Now let's get to the Steelers news. Dwayne Haskins, former first-round pick of the Washington football team, will be signed by the Pittsburgh Steelers. I like this move. He's kind of reminds me a little bit of Big Ben. Big, strong, physical, strapping guys, have great arm strength. I think maybe you can learn a lot in the Pittsburgh Steelers system. And I think this kind of emphasizes Ben Roethlisberger is going to stay for at least one more year. And given that he's going to stay for at least one more year, you can kind of groom him because he's a first-round pick. This guy has talent to potentially maybe be the heir apparent for Big Ben, or at least be a guy that can compete for the backup spot. So I think it's going to be interesting to see Dwayne Haskins and Mason Rudolph compete. Now, let's get to this. Hugh Jackson could potentially be the OC for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They were interviewing him. I don't know officially if the news is broken yet to where he's going to be that coach, but Hugh Jackson could be that coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, for those of you who know, the last time Hugh Jackson was in the NFL, he was known for the abominable trash that was the Cleveland Browns when they didn't win any games. And there was the whole Todd Haley mess going on. That was what we knew Hugh Jackson for when that was going on, kind of messing up Cleveland, right? That's what we know Hugh Jackson for. But let's remember, he's a solid offensive coordinator. When he was with the Bengals and he was with A.J. Green, Andy Dalton, Hugh Jackson was a decent coach. So I think this would be an interesting quarterback hire. I think what we need to look at when it comes to this, how does he relate to Big Ben Roethlisberger? How does Hugh Jackson relate to Big Ben? Because if you want to succeed as the OC, we saw how Todd Haley failed. You have to relate to Big Ben. Now, next up, Ted Thompson, former general manager of the Green Bay Packers, dies at the age of 68. He's most notably known for drafting Aaron Rodgers with the 25th pick in the NFL draft. First of all, I want to say thoughts and prayers out to Ted Thompson and his family and the whole Green Bay Packers organization. One of the better GMs of the NFL during his era. He drafted all these different guys, culminating in a title-winning season. I think it was like 2010 when the Packers beat the Steelers in the Super Bowl. But also, he drafted Aaron Rodgers, this guy from community college. Then he went to Cal. People were saying Alex Smith was the number one overall pick, right? And he took a chance on this guy. Maybe Aaron Rodgers had some personality flaws. He already had Brett Favre, a Hall of Fame quarterback, a top 5 quarterback in the NFL at the time. And he takes a chance on this dude from Cal and is like, this guy can be special. So Ted Thompson, great identifier of talent. Thoughts and prayers, and hopefully he has a great rest. Okay, Aaron Rodgers telling people that there's no extra pressure about the future, and the future is a beautiful mystery. For those of you who don't know, right? So Aaron Rodgers, the Packers, Matt LaFleur, they tried to put a little bit of a wool over his head when they potentially were trying to find his replacement in Jordan Love. Aaron Rodgers' since is going to be MVP of the NFL this year, and it's kind of put all that to rest and laid all that to bed. So with that, I think here's what we need to remember. Aaron Rodgers right now is playing with house money. I think he realizes that as soon as he came in, Jordan Love's not on his level, not anywhere close. And Jordan Love is probably going to be traded by the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers he's like, 38? Probably has at least 4 more years. Like, we're seeing Tom Brady play till he's like 43 at a high level. Aaron Rodgers is way more physically talented than Tom Brady. So theoretically, you would say if Aaron Rodgers takes care of himself like a Tom Brady, like a Drew Brees, he could play just as long. So potentially, you can have 5 more 6 years of Aaron Rodgers, right? If Jordan Love's any good, you can't have him on the bench. We saw this with Jimmy Garoppolo and Tom Brady. The Patriots initially drafted Jimmy Garoppolo to be the heir apparent to Tom Brady. Tom Brady's still playing well. What do? You get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo. That's what you do. So you can turn Jordan Love, when you use an asset for him, into an asset. And I think that's something people don't realize. Now let's get to the NBA. The Brooklyn Nets lost to the Cleveland Cavaliers 147 to 135. I think when we look at this, the biggest thing we need to realize is this. The Cavs have the 4th best defense in the NBA statistically this year. And Brooklyn lit them up. And I know they lost, but Brooklyn lit up the 4th best defense in the NBA this year. They put up 135. With Kyrie coming back after not playing for like 2 to 3 weeks, with James Harden just showing up, right, just 3 games ago. And with Kevin Durant still recovering from his Achilles injury. And they just dropped 135 on one of the best defenses in the NBA. The Brooklyn Nets are going to be special on the offensive side of the ball. People talked about the 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns, the Golden State Warriors with Durant, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Steve Kerr. This Brooklyn Nets team is going to supersede all that. Showtime Lakers with Magic and Kareem and James Worthy running the break. This is what this is going to be. This is going to be something special and extraordinary to behold. And I will say this, the Cavs have one of the worst defenses. Have one of the worst offenses in the NBA, and they were able to score 147 points. Not going to cut it. But here's the thing. Defense is all about effort. Theoretically, they should be able to be around the league average on defense. If they can be around that 15th, and I'll even say at the low end, 20th in the league, 15 to 20th on defense. You can't be at the bottom. You can't be 29th. You can't be 30. You can't be giving up 130 points a game. You just can't do that. That won't win. But if you can just be an average defensive team, if the Brooklyn Nets can just be an average defensive team, and right, guys like Kyrie and James Harden won't have to carry the offensive load like they're used to because you have so many different guys that can get it done every single night. So with that, you should see these guys being able to put more effort on the defense. If you can just be average defensively, the Brooklyn Nets are going to be a problem in the league. Now, talking about problems in the league, the NBA postpones the 6th consecutive game for the Washington Wizards. Also, the Grizzlies will miss 3 straight games because of COVID contact tracing. Here's the thing. If you miss a game, losing all these strings of games, you're not going to be able to make the playoffs. If you're just not playing, like, how do these games happen, right? The NBA is going to be like a 70-72 game season this year. You can't just backload all these games. Like, this is going to hurt teams in the playoff standings. I know this is also the reason why the NBA decided to have a play-in game where I think it's 7th through 11th, and the seeds in each conference have a chance to make the playoffs for the 7th and 8th seed respectively. But it's going to hurt some of these teams, man. It's going to hurt some of these teams when you're missing games, and it will be interesting to see. And lastly, Pac 12 Commissioner Larry Scott mutually agrees to part ways with the conference after 12 years. He will be relieved of his duties on June 30th. So he has about, 4 or 5 months left? Listen, I think we all might know Larry Scott for what happened when the Pac 12 almost decided to not play the football season, right? We know when all this corona stuff, all this COVID controversy was going on, should these college athletes play? The SEC was ahead of the front. The ACC was ahead of the front, and the Big 12 was ahead of the front. Then the Big 10 kind of lagged behind, but got their crap together. And the Pac 12 was just the last team. And it culminated with Oregon winning the conference, which was kind of a travesty and an embarrassment, actually. An embarrassment. And teams only finishing out the season with like 6 games, 5 games, an embarrassment, like 4 games, an embarrassment. The Pac-12 has deteriorated as a conference under his watch. It went from back in the day when you had Andrew Luck, you had Pete Carroll, you had Matt Leonard. Like the Pac-12 used to be one of the conferences. It used to be one of the quarterback conferences, right? Now that's the Big 12, all the quarterbacks. And it used to be one of the conferences, and now it's an afterthought. I've talked to many people about this. My good friend Kenny Sims, scouting expert for 247 Sports, you know what he told me? He said, Daryl, the Pac-12 is now more of the American or the MEC. Like, the group of 5 teams are better than them. My guy Ben Karen, who, like I said, is coming on the podcast tonight, at first he wasn't with that, right? He lives out west. He has that West Coast bias. And he was like, listen, Daryl, as I'm watching these teams, he might be right. You might be right. The Pac-12 is illegitimate. The Pac-12 is a sham. Nobody takes them seriously football-wise, and that's what makes the money in college sports. So I understand why Larry Scott is out. Now, everybody, thank you for tuning into this edition of Outside the Shop. Like I said, if you want to check out my sports podcast that will be released tonight with Ben Karen, host of the Sports Grobbler podcast, you can check it out on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Also, like I said, I'm going to post this video on YouTube, and on the link below, and I'm going to just make sure that the link is actually below here because I'm still working out this new restream thing. But a link below should be an interview I did on my last podcast with Chris Milholland, who covers the Brooklyn Nets for the Nets Daily. And we kind of talk about how Kyrie Irving fits in with the Brooklyn Nets, how he fits in. And I raised some of my concerns that I have with Kyrie because I think Kyrie gets a little bored. But definitely check out that link, about an 8-minute clip from the podcast that I had. Really short listen and some great content. So everybody, thank you, like I said, for listening to this episode. Have a great day and God bless.